Hello, welcome to another wiki procedure, and today we're going to look at adoption in Kenya by foreign parents. Down here below, we have given you a link which is going to direct you directly to our wiki procedure website page, where we have given you detailed information on how you can go about the adoption process. On the right hand side of our screen, we have given you a select language option through which you can select the language which is easy for you to understand or comprehend. And by choosing that language, all the information on our wiki procedure website page will be translated to the language of your choice, and you can easily revert back to English by once again clicking on the select language option and choosing English. Additionally, we've included external links to other websites where you can get more information on how you can go about the adoption process in Kenya. And we are going to go through the adoption process as we move on with the presentation. But before we move on, I will urge you to go ahead and hit the like button on our YouTube page on this video right now, and also click on the subscribe and notification button so you can get notifications every time we upload new content on our wiki procedure YouTube page. So let's get to our presentation. The list of items that we are going to cover today include the need for adoption, the eligibility criteria, the required documents, steps to follow in making the applications, the fees, a validity period, processing time, office's location and contact information, and any other information that we may find relevant on how to go about the adoption process as a foreign parent in Kenya. So welcome to our presentation today, which is brought to you by wikiprocedure.com. The need for adoption. Adoption is the legal process by which a child becomes the child of persons other than his or her natural or biological parents. When a child is legally adopted, the adopter or adopters become the child's parents. Legal adoption permanently transfers all rights and responsibilities along with filiation from the biological parents or parents. The eligibility criteria is as follows. Foreigners are allowed to adopt their first child. For foreigners to be allowed to adopt the first child, one has to meet the following prerequisite conditions. First of all, only married couples may apply for an international adoption in Kenya. The applicants must be aged between 25 and 65 years at the time of submitting their application and must be at least 21 years older than the child. Joint applicant must be married to each other for at least 3 years. Single foreign applicants may not apply for adoption unless under special circumstances. The child to be adopted must be at least 6 weeks old and resident in the Republic of Kenya. All applicants must have completed and complied with the accepted adoption proceedings in their home country or country of residence before applying to the lands proof of such approval should accompany the application. So before applying, they should make sure they have complied with the accepted adoption proceedings of their home country. Additionally, a certified home study report from a certified adoption agency or a certified social worker or relevant authority must also be submitted with the application. And verification must be given by relevant authority of the country of the parents' origin that the child will be granted citizenship once adoption is granted. And the required documents are as follows. You need first of all a home study report of the foreign adoptive parent prepared by a professional social worker, passport copies, 3 full-size color photograph, 3 full-size color photographs of their children if they have any, copies of birth certificates, and copies of birth certificate of their children if they have any children, a copy of marriage certificate, medical certificate including information on the fertility of adopters and their HIV status, a social inquiry report from an official agency detailing preferences of the child to be adopted, 2 references from responsible persons, preferably a local religious leader, commissioner of oaths, notary public or relevant government department. You also need an affidavit from a reliable persons to take charge of the child's in case of death or incapacitation of adoptive parents, a report of financial means supported by official documents, for example, a latest pay slip or bank statement, a letter from employer indicating duration of contract and remuneration, religious affiliation of applicant, a report of fixed assets, a record of convictions if they have any, certificate of good conduct, and a consent from competent court or government authority permitting adopters to adopt a foreign child that adoptive parents are permitted to adopt, and a child according to the law of their country. You should note that all documents submitted by a foreign adoption society must be notarized or authenticated by the ministry responsible for foreign affairs in the receiving country, and any document that is in any other language other than English must be translated by the relevant embassy. So let's move on. Steps to follow making the application are as follows. First of all, let's mention that all international adoptions application must be submitted through a registered adoption agency in the receiving country to a registered adoption agency in the sending country, which is Kenya. And all foreign adoption societies must be approved by the Kenya Adoption Committee before they commence operations. And the adoption society should follow the regulations which require interagency coordination and cooperation. So this application can only be done in person, and the steps involved are as follows. The first step is investigation by authorized bodies in the receiving country. So the adoption applicants have to meet the procedures in their home country before submitting their applications to Kenya through an adoption agency. The couples must be assessed by a competent body or ministry, and criminal records must be checked before approval. Comprehensive examinations must be carried on the adoptive parents, including HIV status, fertility checks, financial status of the applicants, and other comprehensive examinations, which you have already mentioned earlier. The couple must also undergo pre-adoption counseling in preparation, which shall cover the adoption process, length of the time of the adoption process, challenges to expect during adoption, the backgrounds of the children to be adopted, and etc. This will be followed by an application form for adoption to be filled by the applicants through the Foreign Adoption Society and submitted with all the required documents. The required documents have already been mentioned in the required documents section. So let's move on. Once the application has been submitted, the second step is the formal application to the Kenyan Adoption Agency. So the foreign agency must ensure that all documents required are in place before forwarding the application to the Kenyan Adoption Agency. Now, upon receipt of the application for adoption from the Foreign Adoption Agency, the Kenyan agency shall forward the same to the Kenyan Adoption Committee within 30 days from the date of receipt. And the third step is the Kenyan Adoption Committee. So after the Kenyan agency has forwarded the application to the Kenyan Adoption Committee, you need to know this is the central body governing all adoptions in the country, and this committee shall consider all applications for international adoption and shall either approve or reject the application. The decision shall be communicated to the local adoption society within 30 days from the date of such a decision is made. So the fourth step, after the Kenyan Adoption Committee has sat down and has deliberated, is the communication to the local agency. And there can be three scenarios. The first scenario is a communication of approval. This is where an approval for adoption is granted. The local adoption agency shall communicate to the foreign adoption agency within 60 days from the date of receipt of approval. This will be accompanied by a brief report on the children available for adoption at the time, who match the adopter's preferences, information about the approximate length of time that adoption may take, relevant cost and relevant costs involved in the process, a copy of the undertakings to be signed by the foreign adoption agency before conclusion of the adoption process. The second scenario can be in case of rejection. So where an application is rejected, it shall be communicated to the Foreign Adoption Agency within 60 days from the date of receipt of such a rejection by the local adoption society, giving reasons for rejection. And in this instance, you can have an appeal. So the third scenario can be an appeal in case of rejection, and in case of rejection, an adoption agency application by the Kenyan Adoption Agency. In case of rejection of an adoption application by the Kenyan Adoption Committee, a foreign adoption society must submit another application for adoption within 6 months from the date of rejection from the previous application. So let's move to the next step, which is after now the communication from the Kenya Adoption Committee. So in case of approval, the fifth step is travel and arrival to Kenya by the adoptive parents. So upon receiving communication of approval, the Foreign Adoption Society will arrange for the prospective parents to travel to Kenya within 3 months from the date of receipt. And upon arrival to Kenya, the local adoption society shall receive the applicants and direct them to suitable accommodation, and the accommodation conditions must be assessed suitably. So after arrival, the sixth step is pre-placement, counseling, and placement. So before placement, the child and the applicant must undergo 3-hour compulsory replacement counseling and training in preparation of receiving the child, and this shall be done by a counselor attached to the local adoption agency. And the applicants will then be directed to the child already identified for them. A 2-week familiarization period is recommended while the child is still in the home. Then the child is then placed in the care of the prospective parents, and a care agreement form is signed. So after that, the 7th step is foster period and follow-up or supervision period. So upon placement with a child for adoption for at least upon placement with the child for adoption, at least one of the prospective parents must reside in the country for 3 consecutive months with the child. So one parent can go back to the home country, but one has to stay in Kenya for 3 consecutive months with the child. And during this 3-month fostering period, follow-up visits will be carried out to assess the bonding and adjustment of both the child and the prospective parent. And the visits will be carried out as follows. The first follow-up will be 1 month after discharge of the baby or the child, and this will be conducted at the local adoption society office. The second follow-up will be the 2nd month after discharge of the baby or child, and this will be conducted at the local adoption society office. And the final follow-up will be 3 months after discharge, and it must be conducted at the applicant's home to observe the adjustment of the child in the home environment. You need to note that the relevant children's home will conduct their independent follow-up visit on agreed intervals. For example, fortnightly, monthly, etc. So after the foster and follow-up supervision session, the 8th step is the legal process. So if the prospective adopter completes the placement period successfully, the local adoption society will assist them in identifying a suitable lawyer or advocates to represent them their case in court. The legal process involves 3 hearings, but this could also be more. And both applicants and the child must be present in all court sessions. A guardian ad litem, and if that is a friend of the child, will also be appointed by the National Adoption Committee to safeguard the interests of the child in course of the court proceedings. Where an adoption order is granted, the local adoption agency shall notify the foreign adoption agency within 7 days from the date of the order is made. The 9th step is issuing of the adoption certificate. This document will be issued by the registrar of births and deaths once the adoption orders are granted, and it replaces the birth certificate. Therefore, the adoptive parents may only get a copy of the birth certificate, but not the original. The process of obtaining the adoption certificate may take 3 to 5 working days. The 10th step is traveling out of Kenya. Ensure that you have all the required documents. These include adoption order and adoption certificate, a clearance letter from the Kenya Department of Children's Services, from the Ministry of Home Affairs to allow the child to leave the country, travel document, not necessarily a passport, issued by the Department of Immigration of Kenya, a visa which will be issued by the receiving country's embassy in Kenya. The local adoption society shall also assist the adoptive parents to obtain these documents from the relevant authorities. You need to note the adoptive parents can only leave the country with the child once the adoption order is granted and all the above mentioned documents are issued. And the parents should contact the local adoption agency if they need assistance in booking any flight ticket. And the final step is post-adoption progress reports. So here the foreign adoption agency must send reports on the progress of the adopted child to the local adoption agency. These reports must be submitted once every 3 months during the first 2 years from the date of making of the adoption order, and annually thereafter for 3 years. So those are the steps. And the fees, the legal fees for processing the adoption process are required at various stages of the application process, and these fees vary depending on the agency which you use to facilitate the adoption process, and these fees will be explained by the adoption agency which you are using to make the adoption. The validity period is forever. The processing time, this can take more than 1 year, usually 1.5 years. The office location of Children's Services, State Department for Social Protection, they are located at Bishop Road, National Social Security House, and you can also visit them at www.socialprotection.go.ke. Other information is that the following persons are not allowed to adopt in Kenya: any person not of sound mind within the meaning of sound mind in the Mental Health Act of Kenya; any person who has been charged and convicted of any of the following offenses: defilement, sexual offenses, immoral behavior, and attempting to procure an abortion, unnatural offenses, and assault; any person who is an homosexual. Homosexuality is illegal in Kenya, so no gay person is allowed to adopt in Kenya. And in the case of joint application, they must not be married to each other, and also a sole foreign male applicant is not allowed to adopt or make an application for adoption in Kenya. So thank you for watching. It was a bit long but comprehensive. So once again, I urge you to go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification button so you can get notifications every time we upload new content on our YouTube page. So thank you for watching, and I wish you all the best in your adoptive process.